particular noting that there are a lot of different organisations that play a key role in this, and that we are only one partner. So in particular, looking at where can we be most effective, what's a role that really plays to our strengths.
Final question, Madam Chair. If the time frame for this is to report this research in April, I assume from that there could be a couple of solutions that may have budgetary implications. Is that going to be able to inform the draft annual plan debate, or are we going to run out of time for that, and will this work then have to feed into the long-term plan?
Through Madam Chair, I think our assumption is that it would need to flow into the long-term plan process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee, Councillor Mike Lee.
I just want to ask some questions about the council current activities, but I want to advise the meeting that Heart of the City organisation contacted me and just wanted the committee to be reminded that the $2 million which is dedicated to upgrading or putting an extra floor on the James Lisson Hotel came from the targeted rate authorised by the City Centre Advisory Panel. So I just want to make that point. The question is, the operating expenditure over 3 years, in the first bullet point, what is that actually for?
Madam Chair, could I invite Graham Bodman to join us, who can answer some of these questions?
Absolutely. Welcome, Graham.
Okay. Through the Chair, the $830,000 was provided in the first LTP. It comprised $110,000 per annum to look at emergency housing support activity, and that money's been spent on, for instance, supporting the Salvation Army with a initiative in West Auckland and a variety of other activities. There's also been $250,000 per annum for the first 2 years of the LTP, which was used to support the emergency housing sector, and that's been used working with the Community Housing Aotearoa to support the sector getting good data, getting more data information to help them make good decisions, and a range of activities, including working around the possibility of provision of lockers in the inner city. And I haven't come with all the information with me, but we've got I think the paper actually going up to the committee on Thursday. It's got a summary of of what that's been spent on.
The sector is not directly going to the homeless; it's going via the sector for support activities.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Darby.
Thank you, and thanks to Councillor Lee. Just reiterating the point about engagement with the Heart of the City and the City Centre Advisory Board, taking into account that $2 million that came from the City Centre ratepayers. Look, main thing is I'm encouraged to see that, yes, we have a lot of data, and I thank you, Rohan and Karaina, for this work, but it may be necessary to review some of that to update it. I gather that's what you are doing. And I'm particularly pleased, and I want to make note of this, that you have expanded this definition of homelessness. Well, you've probably always had this definition, but you've expanded it into our consciousness, that this issue is also people living in garages, uninhabitable basements where you're sleeping next to the jack studs, garden sheds, caravan parks, and I'm hearing that there's a lot of homelessness in caravan parks. They're actually not homes in caravan parks. It's homelessness it's a displacement to the caravan park because of homelessness. So are we likely to be getting a read on all of that? Is that data in, or is it maybe going to be re-investigated as part of the review? I'm just wanting to get my understanding of that review scope.
Through the Chair, I'm sorry, it's difficult to answer that question. We'd have to go and look to see whether the data that we're drawing on differentiates if you're interested in people living in caravan parks specifically, or whether they group everyone living in temporary accommodation, which is what they class caravan parks to include. So, but I just want to reiterate, our work is focused on policy responses around the question rather than trying to gather more data. We're drawing on the data that is in existence that's available to us.
Okay, then that makes it clear. So just the last question really is this work likely to identify, entities and agencies other than council that might be responsible, and to identify the limits of council?
Through the chair, yes, I think that's an inherent part of this work, and so we've been putting together sort of systems mapping to understand what roles different organisations are currently playing in relation to homeless people in all of those 4 types of homelessness, and certainly we'll be looking to see where the gaps are or where there are opportunities which fit well with the kind of role that the council can play.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Critical question, Councillor Darby, and I think that answers Councillor Lee's question. We fund the research and the bringing together of the agencies. We fill the gaps. We're not a service provider, and I think that's a really important differentiation to Councillor Mayor Goff.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to build on the question that Chris Darby was asking. And the question is really about how focused your recommendations might be. When I look at what we put in the Auckland plan, and it's set out in the paper under section 13, substantially raise living standards for all Aucklanders and house all Aucklanders in secure, healthy homes they can afford. Yeah, that's aspirational, and it's important to be aspirational. But the real question is how we can make a difference. And I want to thank you for the work that you've done here, and also Councillor Casey for her long-term advocacy on behalf of the homeless. But I think that what we want to do on council, is focus where we can make a difference. We're putting in several $1 million one way or the other, and that's helpful, but it's a drop in the bucket if you're talking about 20,000 homeless Aucklanders. I think the more useful figure in the 2013 census, and I don't doubt it'll be much higher now, is the 771, which are people living without shelter. And just wanted to draw the attention to the committee that the program that we're working with the housing providers for, which are Vision West, Affinity, Link People and the Auckland City Mission and Lifewise, is going to be focused on the people who are living without shelter. And what they've asked us to do is to be advocates, and your database that you've collected together will help us advocate for the wider problem. But secondly, they want us to coordinate. I think we can work with central government. They're putting up $4 million for Housing First. Housing First is the philosophy that I think most people believe is the most appropriate one to deal with the chronically homeless. And if we can act in a coordinating role with those 4 separate agencies, then we can make a difference at the worst end of the problem. And what I'm really asking is that going to be kind of the focus of what you come out with, or are you going to go much wider than that?
Through Madam Chair, I think the answer is both. I think that we certainly want to focus on that group, that 771 group without shelter that you're talking about. There is a lot of investment from ourselves and from government into that, and we really need to have the assurance from looking at evaluations that that is the right thing to be doing. The indications are absolutely that it is, but I think it's good to confirm that. But then we feel that it's important to consider the less visible Aucklanders who are also homeless, and partly because we need to think about preventing future homelessness, and that people aren't just cycling through different forms of homelessness, and then so that in effect it's a funnel that we can't that we can't stop. So I think we need to be focused, as you say, but also take the broader view as well.
And my supplementary question through you, Madam Chair, obviously in Hamilton we've got the People's Project, which is a model of how Housing First is working, where, a year out, 93% of those people that were chronically homeless with drug and addiction and debt and psychological mental health problems, they're focusing on those. Are you looking at that as a model for what we can do as Auckland City in terms of making a difference on the problem? So it's not that we've got tens of millions that we can put into it, but we can make sure that the money is going into it is properly coordinated. We can collect data, we can monitor how the programs are working, and we can advocate to government to put the resources where they can be best spent.
No, yes, absolutely, that is within the scope. Yes.
Thank you.
And just to be assured, we've spent time with Jackie and Julie and the team in Hamilton to make sure that we're all talking the same language. Member Wilcox.
So I've got a few questions, and I suppose number one is the scope is the management to improve the experience of homelessness. I'm just a bit concerned, is homelessness an experience to be improved? I would have thought the thing of homeless is not to be homeless. There's no improvement in, or are there different degrees of homelessness?
So through the chair, I absolutely take your point. And so a key focus is trying to reduce and end homelessness, obviously. But we feel that it's important to consider the experience of people who are homeless at the moment, because we know that this is not something we can fix immediately. So we think we have to consider what the needs are of people who are experiencing homelessness at the moment.
So, yeah, like I said, I've got a couple of questions. So then the scope of this work that you're doing, you're obviously working towards a point where you're actually going to have to do more as we graduate along the line of we're being successful or we're not being successful. Is this, have I got it right? Because, I mean, if we're just trying to, go to step one, that's fine, but then there's another level again. So will this be an evolving plan, kaupapa?
Through the chair, I think that depends on what we find during our evaluation. So we might find that the areas that we're currently focusing on our activities on are absolutely the right ones, or maybe they are the right ones, but we also need to extend those into some other areas. So at this point in time, we're trying to clarify the scope. It's hard to predict what that future picture is going to look like.
So my second series of questions refers to we have done something. We had the RSSG. Where have we learned from that?
Through Madam Chair, so the RSSG is the Rough Sleepers Steering Group, which is a coordinating group which has representation from council as well as some public sector organisations and some community sector organisations. And perhaps I can turn to Graham to make some comments on that, if I may.
Yes, certainly, through the chair. So the Roughs, I'm not quite sure what the question was, but the Roughs Sleeping Steering Group was set up to focus primarily in the central business district and the question of responding to rough sleeping in the CBD. So it's been extremely useful in terms of being a basis for all those key agencies, the District Health Board, Ministry of Social Development, Housing New Zealand, Corrections, Council in a coordination role to come together to coordinate a response, and particularly working with the City Mission and LifeWise in this area as well. So it's been useful, as the Mayor mentioned, with the rolling out of Housing First across the region. It may be that over time the role of the Rough Sleeping Steering Group actually changes to take a broader region-wide view, but that needs to be worked through with the wider sector.
So bottom line is, have we seen an outcome that's good out of the RSSG?
Through the Chair, yes.
Okay, I'd like to see that in a later time, Madam Chair. And finally, we gave $1 million to the Ministry of Social Development. Yeah, what did that get spent on?
Good question. Through the Chair, the $1 million you're referring to is a contribution towards the Housing First initiative. So the Mayor mentioned previously about the $4 million towards the Housing First initiative, which is a request for proposal for providers that was sought through the MSD in July last year. Initially they had a $3 million budget, and we've contributed an additional $1 million towards that, which has brought the total up to $4 million.